and subscribe.
On the morning of May 9th, 1968, the Kray twins and other members of the firm were arrested by Nipper Reed and his team and charged with the murders of George Cornell, Frank Mitchell and Jack the Hat McVitie. The trial of the Old Bailey was presided over by Justice Melford Stevenson and became one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in English legal history.
When I started the investigation, I'd become a superintendent and posted to the murder squad. I'd made it. And then I went in to see the assistant commissioner, and he said to me, congratulations. Now, Mr. Reed, he said, I want you to do the Krays. I think we thought the best evidence probably was Cornell. If we won that, and then went on to McVitie, the publicity that was associated with the first trial was such that it could be said we couldn't get a fair trial on the second one. And that was the arrangement that we said, well, we'll join the two murders and we'll leave Mitchell out, and then we'll have a separate trial for Mitchell. And that's what we did.
It was quite obvious they should have been tried separately. And not only did I move the court, move Melford, he should try them separately, but I got him to stop the trial so that I could take the case to the Court of Appeal. They likewise refused. Backroom talk with the Court of Appeal judges, clerks. The government behind this and the Court of Appeal weren't going to interfere.
Really, it was the fact that these two murders were alike in so many ways, because they'd been committed by criminals who were conjoined, not only because they were brothers and twins, but because they were leading the same gang, and that there was the same motive, or there was the lack of motive that impelled us to say, well, there is a relationship between the two that can be established, and it was accepted.
I think they had a good chance of getting off if they'd been tried separately, and I don't mean the two twins separately, but two murders separately.
There were 10 men in the dock. Only 2, Ronnie Kray and Ian Barry, were on trial for the murder of George Cornell. The remaining 8 men sat in front of the jury, awaiting their trial for the murder of Jack McVitie.
Ian Barry had to sit through the whole trial of the evidence against the gruesome evidence in the case of McVitie. It was nothing to do with him, and similarly, the other defendants like Bender, Whitehead, the Lambrianos had to sit through something that didn't concern them at all. And of course, in my view, it was tainted and prejudicial. I don't think it's happened since or would ever happen again.
Well, it's one of the great trials of the 20th century. One of the great criminal trials. It was a great show trial. It was a mafia trial, and they conducted like a mafia trial right from the very beginning, when the police convoy brought them into the Old Bailey. Each of the jurors had a policeman to be responsible for him. The convoy coming up from, I think it was Brixton Prison every day, was enormous, sirens every day. It had been announced before the trial that it would take a different route each day for security.
It was really the police, or the Home Office through the police, trying to pretend to the jury that they were likely to be mobbed at any moment by someone representative of this gang. And the mere fact that the leaders were all in jail and all on trial didn't mean there wasn't a big gang threatening them all the time.
The security that was adopted in bringing them to court and taking them away was absolutely necessary. We were talking about 2 people and a gang who committed brutal murders, and there was no possibility that they could be allowed to be conveyed to court in any other way.
Oh, it's incredible. Sirens and motorbikes. I mean, they used to start, we used to get to the Old Bailey in record time, 16 minutes, I think, from Brixton Prison to the Old Bailey. These screaming sirens and motorbike outriders, the Krays are coming, there'd be crowds everywhere.
And holding back 30 or 40 people at the end of the road, don't go down there, it's too dangerous. We're all in a van for a buck.
I'm sure that the jury and everybody around it was affected by the heavy security.
Of course it tainted the jury. I mean, all the whole circus must have tainted them.
Every single night, the television had come on, the news, we'd be on the news. Every single night. Now, it was a trial by publicity.
Today, many judges would have reported newspapers and television for contempt. The Krays, in my view, were killed by publicity.
You're convicted before you even kick a ball. Games and match.
We made our own minds up that we're not going to be any part of them, which we wasn't. Yeah. And there was no way on God's earth that we're going to use their barristers. And so we picked our barrister. And our solicitor. A good solicitor. And, we went our separate ways.
It was established early on by his counsel that he was going to give evidence, and the substance of that would be that he was under duress from the Krays during the whole of this exercise, and that took away from him his freedom of action.
Well, it was terrifying because there was 10 of us in the dock, and I was the only one there pleading for myself. The rest was as a mob, and I had to be really on my toes going in and out of the dock every day.
I think really and truly there was so much evidence against them. The twins should have put their hands up and said, look, we'll take it, because they was apparently offered the deal that you take it, like you put your hands up to it and all the rest can walk.
They expected them to go down with them. That was their sort of like a death wish they had, We're going down, you've got to come down with us, we'll go together. That's not right. They wasn't responsible for what the twins did.
When each of them was arrested, I interviewed them and said, look, this is your one opportunity. You will never get another. I'm telling you now that I'm going to charge the Krays with murder, and there may be other cases as well. You've now got the opportunity, if you choose, to come on the side of law and order, to make a statement to me and tell me all you know about the Krays, and this is the only opportunity you'll get.
All of a sudden, you've got their own cousin, Ronnie Hart, done the right grassing anyway. He's told them exactly what's happened, and about half a dozen more of the so-called heavyweights on the firm have all grasped one another and grasped the twins.
Well, this was a disgusting trial in that sense, that the number of people who were singing, betraying, it was really grotesque. And people who I'd met 6 months before as staunch friends, buddies, allies, whatever they were, of the Krays, members of the firm, which is it was a load of nonsense. There was really no such thing. They were a rabble. But all these guys, and suddenly there they were, large as life, saying how dreadful the Krays had been.
I pleaded guilty because I had no chance. The charge was harbouring Frank Mitchell, and I told them to read what it was all about. And then he says, can you tell me about the Cornell? I said, yeah.
And Ronnie said, we got Scotch Jack is going to take Cornell's murder. Ronnie Hart is going to take Jack the Hat, and we want you to take Frank Mitchell. So I thought about it just for a few seconds, and I said, no, I ain't having that.
Of course, you can't ask a man to do that. What sane man's got to say, yeah, I'll put my hands up to a murder and get a life sentence for something I've not committed? It's ridiculous to even think it, you know. Of course, he had to roll over.
The loyalty of all the other gang members is something that's quite remarkable. They did not want to dissociate themselves with the Krays and in that way appear unloyal, because this was the structure, this was the society.
We're loyal to the culture. We're loyal to the friends that we've always known, the people we drink with, the people we eat with, the people we piss and shit with. You understand? Not the Krays.
I put them before my own family. You know, Christians had to go along with it, whether he liked it or not. That was chosen by went down that road. And there was no going back.
They didn't have to go down. They could have done what Albert done and what I done. They thought, well, the twins will get us off with this. They've got good lawyers, good barristers, plenty of money about. Plenty of money about for them. God knows what they paid. The rest of them had to get legal aid.
No, the ministerial responsibility does not apply to someone who says, I never did it. It's as I always say, there's an alibi and self-defense. You can't have both. If he said, yes, I did it, then we look into what the state of his mind was at the time. But he always denied he did any of the offences.
Justice Melford Stevenson was legendary for imposing long sentences with terse and often corrosive remarks. He had acquired a reputation as Britain's toughest judge, terrifying defendants and barristers alike.
I thought he was just the judge for the case. I was very impressed by him because he brooked no interference, he stood no nonsense, and he made sure that people knew that he was the judge, it was his trial and things were going to go as he wanted it, and they did, and I think the jury were very impressed by him.
The first day of the trial, we go in there and the defendants come up into the dock, and Mr. Justice Melford Stevenson actually has prepared, I think, 6x6 cardboard cutouts and expects each defendant to wear one around the neck with a number. I thought that was done purely to humiliate them, and in my view, very, very, very disgraceful.
He decided to put numbers on us with pink ribbons.
He said that they was confused with who was sitting in the dock. You know, they sat there looking at us long enough for 6 months. They should, you know, they knew who we were, all right.
He wanted to call us number 1 and number 2 and number whatever, you know?
I was the first one to say, well, I think it's a we're at a cattle market here, you know. We're to get these off, you're not putting that around my neck.
They arranged that all of them, on the count of 3, should take them off and throw them down. I remember them rehearsing this, telling us they're planning this and rehearsing it in the cells. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Throw them down, boy.
But unfortunately for me, my counsel said, Tony, don't take yours off. You know, because we're all like this, going to throw them. He said, no, 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 no. And he begged me not to part with mine. And I had to sit there with mine while all the chaps started tearing theirs up.
I've been doing criminal law for nearly 40 years, and I've never come across any case where any judge has behaved in that manner. I'm sorry to say, judges are supposed to be the pillars of society. He was a High Court judge, and I think throughout the trial he treated everyone with contempt, besides the prosecution, but it was totally unfair.
Oh yes, he tried to undermine our points and to underscore the points made for the prosecution. There's no doubt of that, but that's within the scope of a wayward judge anyway.
If any good point was being said by defense witness, the judge would turn to the jury and literally smirk and turn his eyebrows up. Things like that don't go on transcripts, unfortunately, and so it's very difficult to lodge an appeal on those grounds, but it happened. Everyone saw it.
Well, you hear that, members of the jury? You know, a nod and a wink, as it were. You see what they're after. You see what the defence is after now. That sort of comment.
The judge was continuously rude to John Platt-Mills, quite unnecessarily. And I think it got to a stage one day Ronnie jumped up in the dock and shouted at the judge, "You leave him alone, he's doing all right."
The thing that struck me most at the time, which was quite odd, was the class aspect. I found something deeply unpleasant about it. It was much more than just a murder trial. It was as though the upper classes had rounded on these two upstarts and thought they'd teach them a jolly good lesson, which they did. I think Reggie was aware of what was going to happen to him at the trial. He certainly was. He looked absolutely haunted. He looked terrible. But Ronnie was as smug as a bug in a rug. Happy. I think he loved all the eyes upon him, yes. And you would have thought, and the way he came in each day, came up the stairs and looked to the public gallery. I mean, as though he was in the theatre. I think he enjoyed it.
He said something like, "You can understand that if I wasn't here now, I'll be having tea with Judy Garland."
Ronnie saw me from the dock, and he wrote me a little note, which I've still got, because I thought it was so funny, saying, "Dear Miss Lethbridge, you are more beautiful than ever. When I get out of this, I'm going to take you to the moon."
Many a time during the trial, Ronnie was asleep in the afternoons, and he was asleep to the point that he was snoring. Reggie, on the other hand, was very intense and very attentive to everything.
Reggie went into the box and said that this was a conspiracy between Superintendent Reed and the Home Secretary to get the Krays put away. Well, even if that was a thought, it wasn't the way to introduce it.
He was always very particular throughout the case, before and after and during the trial, what the public thought of them. He always was concerned, what did they say about us outside?
Ronnie Kray couldn't make up his mind whether he was going to give evidence or not. And eventually the judge got a bit upset and said, "Now, Mr. Platt-Mills, is your client going into the witness box or not?" And then Ronnie shouted, "I am going into the witness box." And in he went. And of course he made an utter fool of himself.
Yes, Ronnie should never have got into the witness box. Because he just couldn't control his temper. In cross-examination about anything, he would flare up. He cut his own throat, really.
Ken Jones said to him, "Weren't you known as the Colonel? Isn't that a title that you've adopted for yourself?" He said, "That may or may not be," he said, "but you're a fat slob."
Jones stood there and just let it sink in, and let it sink in with the jury, I'm sure, because Ronnie was screaming and excited and just showing himself to be the sort of man who would, on a whim, shoot or knife somebody. And I'm sure Jones enjoyed every bit of being called a slob at that moment.
Ronnie was in the box. Melford said to him, "Mr. Kray, I think you've only said two things in the whole of your evidence. The first is the prosecutor's a big fat slob, and the next, that I'm prejudiced against you, because I certainly am."
Mr. Foreman, I want you to ask me simply by saying yes or no. Have you all reached a verdict in the case of Ronald Kray in the first indictment? Yes. Have you reached a second indictment? Yes. And then went back to say, "And then how do you find Reggie?" And he said, "Guilty." And then he said, "Guilty." And I was looking down like this, and I couldn't look up. My eyes were full of tears. It was a bit of a, all the work that we'd done was justified.
Ronnie Kray, 30 years. Ian Barry, 20 years. Ronnie Bender, 20 years. Reggie Kray, 30 years. Charles Kray, 10 years. Tony Barry acquitted being under duress. Chris Lambriano, 15 years. Freddie Foreman, 10 years. Tony Lambriano, 15 years. Connie Whitehead, 7 years.
Well, the judge was so carried away by the duty he felt he had to put down the whole tribe that he dished it out to the lesser members as well. I never thought that Milford would swing with such violence.
I wasn't surprised at the sentences in any way. A gang of people that had ruled the East End of London by a regime of terror and fear had killed people coldly, analytically, motivelessly, in full view of other people, simply because they wanted to exercise their authority as gang leaders.
Reggie would have been in a place like this. This is a cell, it's not wide and it's not long, and you never felt the cold until you've been in somewhere like this. He might have had a few photographs and pictures on the wall, a bed there, maybe he'd been allowed a bed cover and a radio, and that would have been his total existence.
Day to day, that's how you live it. That's how you live it. You survive it, you come out of it, but you can never forget it.
I've seen a man killed over a small transistor radio. Man walked by me and said, "Good morning, Chris," and walked in a cell and murdered a man with a homemade knife in cold blood over a small transistor radio. What price life?
He had his fights with the Screws when they first went away. He tried to kill himself. No one said about that, but he tried to kill himself because he was sick of the life he had in there.
I don't think he meant to top himself. I think it was a cry, a terrible cry. Help me.
A man who does more than 10 years is changed for the worse, forever, I believe. An ordinary man of ordinary capacity, I think, is ruined by it. You've got to have some spark of genius or maybe a political ideal.
If Reggie Kray had expressed complete remorse some years ago when his 30 years was up, then the probability is that he would have been allowed out.
I think it was everything, the books and the films and everything that had gone around, and I do believe that when they sentenced Reg and Ron, and they sent them to prison, and they locked the doors, and they believed that they had well and truly thrown away the key, then at the next step would simply be obscurity. And in fact the exact opposite happened, and the media interest grew and the public fascination grew, and the Home Office found itself 27 years down the road with two men who had become incredibly famous.
The idea of somebody who's in prison becoming the subject matter of a film is deeply unpopular. I think it's felt that somehow, even if it isn't financially, they will benefit. And benefit by the fame, if that is a benefit, by the notoriety. The last thing that anybody in prison needs is a high profile. And they were, to a certain extent, author of their own misfortunes.
Among his writings were certain revelations that were not popular with other members of the firm, who were still serving long prison sentences.
4 or 5 years later, he admits it. I done it for you. What good was that to me, or any other defendant, any of us? Nothing. Yeah, I was disillusioned with it. Big sick about it. There I am sitting to Nick for something that he couldn't admit before, then a couple of years later he comes out of it. Did we all go down for him to write a book?
Ronnie Kray wanted a traditional East End funeral, and his family made sure his wishes were respected down to the last detail. Among the masses of flowers was a tribute from Reggie which read, "To the other half of me."
And then came the message from Reg. "My brother Ron is now free and at peace. Ron had great humour, a vicious temper, was kind and generous. He did it all his way, but above all he was a man, and that's how I'll always remember my twin brother, Ron. God bless Reg Kray.
I first met Reg, it was about 5 years ago, and it was through a mutual friend. Reg was making a documentary video about Ron's life, the death of Ron, the funeral, and he wanted someone who would do all the press releases, to help out with the press releases, and a friend of mine was supposed to be doing it, couldn't do it, and asked me if I would do it. I don't doubt that there was a big space in Reggie's life and a terrible emptiness, and I can't say I went in and filled that, because you can't replace someone else, you can't take the place of them, but you can just help to ease that pain and to give someone some love, and if they can give you some love back as well, then you have achieved something. He was different to how I expected, and he was a much warmer person, much livelier person, a much more interesting and intelligent person. And from that day we began a friendship, and that friendship grew into love and marriage. It was interesting. I don't think I ever perceived him as a psychopath, because I don't believe he ever filled the criteria for a psychopath. Obviously he had killed, but I think one of the interesting things about him, I felt, was his courage. And I know people will sit there and think, well, what's courageous about spending 32 years in prison? But it's the way that he spent that time and how he survived that time. And I think a lot of people in a similar situation would be very angry at other people, at the world. They would turn against them. They would turn in against themselves, become very self-destructive. I'm not saying that Reg never felt any of those emotions. You know, he was a human being, of course he did. But he went through them and came out the other end and found something good in the world for himself. I think the telephone was what enabled our relationship to grow and to thrive. Reg rang me every morning as soon as he got up. He'd ring me last thing at night before he locked up, and he would ring me anything from 10 to 20 times in between, depending on how many phone cards he could get hold of. Reg proposed to me, over the phone, I might add. And so I asked him if he was down on one knee, and he said he definitely was. We got married in the chapel at Maidstone Prison. They originally refused to let us have any photos taken of our wedding at all, and it took a lot of persuasion before they finally agreed. But only on the condition that a prison officer took the photographs and that they maintained they held on to the negatives afterwards. About a month after the wedding, they took us into a small room when I was on a visit. They had the photographs laid out on a table, 60, 70 photos, and they told us we could choose 10 of those pictures. It was 15 months before I finally got the set of 10 pictures. All these photographs are obviously Crown copyrighted. We weren't allowed to use them. The 10 I received I wasn't allowed to reproduce in any way. They belonged to the Crown. I don't think I'd have married Reg if I'd believed that he was never coming out of prison, because I think it would have been a meaningless gesture. And when I did marry him, it was firstly a commitment to him to say I love you, but secondly to say I believe in you and I believe that one day you are coming out of prison. And yes, you hope that it will help, that he will be coming out to a stable home, a stable place to live, and all those factors will help in the parole board's decision.
The vice the twins had, Reggie and all at times, was boys. That was their vice.
Of course, we knew Ronnie was, fancy boys. We knew that from the days of the early days when he told Charlie. He said, we had a big quarrel, this Charlie. He said, you might as well know it. He said, I'm bisexual. Well, Charlie was dumbstruck, He looked at him, he went, what? I can't believe you, mate. He said,
well, you like men as well as women? He went, yes, he said. He said, if Mother can cope with it, she knows, so can you. And he walked away. And that was the statement when he first admitted openly, I'm bisexual and I'm proud of it, so I don't care who knows.
And Reggie was also bisexual. Being gay then wasn't like being gay now. It was sort of all have to be hid under the carpet type of thing.
We was at a party one night in East End, and I went looking for my mate Harry Abrams, and he was with this girl. Anyway, I went in the wrong room. I opened the wrong door, and there was Reggie giving the young boy one. And I thought, God, and he come out, got hold of me, Reggie outside. He said, you're dead. He said, don't you breathe a fucking word of this. He said, you're dead.
I think they being the macho image they had, they would like, to me, they wouldn't show that side of their nature or their character. They didn't want me to see that. I never suspected Reggie. I thought Reggie's always been a straight guy. You know?
I never had a problem with it at all. I didn't say that it diminished his love for me in any way. That he could fall in love with a man, he could fall in love with a woman. And we had fallen in love. I was aware that he was bisexual, and I accepted it. I was also very aware that, having been in prison for, by then, 27, 28 years, that he had spent that time surrounded by men where the only possibility of any kind of relationship, emotional, sexual, whatever it might be, it was always going to be with another man.
I think he fought it in the beginning. I think it came out when he was in prison more than anything else. He certainly liked the company of women, and he was debonair, and I'm sure there's quite a few young ladies who've been to bed with Reggie, I can guarantee that.
We weren't able to consummate the marriage while he was in prison, obviously, but later we were. Reg was ill for a number of years, probably starting at Maidstone, continuing at Wayland, getting progressively worse through his 3 years at Wayland until the final year, when he was in almost continual pain and discomfort.
I says to him, you don't look too clever. But I shouldn't have said that to him. I should have said, oh, you're looking all right. You know what I mean? But you don't think, you just say what's on your mind. And he didn't look clever at all. He looked very ill. And he had cancer.
It was a huge event for him to get his freedom. He'd waited 32 years for that, and he was tremendously happy, he was tremendously elated. But at the same time, the downside for it was that it was almost like a confirmation of the fact that he was dying.
You don't see it at the time, because I had a wife and a young child, and I had a son born when I was on remand. I was never to see him until he was 16 years of age when I come out. I had a daughter who was nearly 6 and was 22, nearly 23 when I come out of the nick. The marriage was over. My father became an old man, never knowing really what had happened. You know, and the tragedy and heartache there left for all our families. What good came out? Where was the glamour and all that? There was no glamorous about it.
We'd lost everything, really. We'd given everything up for them. Our future, our lives.
Our club got ruined after the trial, within a matter of about months. The police revoked the licence and put us out of business.
It's like the association, the smear it rubbed off on us, you understand? 1970, that was it, it was all over.
It's really a Cockney tragedy. It's a very, very sad, god-awful story. The idea of it actually encouraging anyone, or anyone wanted to be like the Krays, is another part of the sadness, because it's something sad in our own society, which makes heroes of people like this.
But what better message can you put out to the would-be gangsters of today, or the criminals coming up? These are the heroes you look up to. to the youth and say, well, look what happened to them. The three of them have all died in prison.
I find it hard to believe they're all gone, sitting here tonight. But it seems to me that that's the way it had to be, one or the other. It was a warning that if you do this, or you do that, this is what can happen to you. And I think that was the message left here over the years.
Prison life is a waste of time. I get letters from all over the country. These kids write to me, and I advise them. It's very difficult when kids got nothing to do and they've got no money and they've got all kinds of social problems out there, so it's easier to say than it is done. But speaking from the heart to them, I'd like to see them stay in prison. But whether they can do so, I don't know. Some will make it and some won't.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.